Welcome to Hearts of Scripture, where ancient words come alive, where every story of the Bible touches the heart and awakens the soul. This is the story told through the eyes of Dante Alighieri, the one who walked through the depths of the soul and saw the light of heaven within the darkness of humanity. Today, I invite you to walk with me through that journey once more, not to hear another sermon, but to live again the pilgrimage of faith, of doubt and of rebirth. I do not speak from memory, but from the witness of one who has walked, who has fallen, and who has been lifted up. Every word I speak is the ashes of doubt and the fire of grace. This is not only an ancient story, it is the story of every soul still wrestling between light and shadow, between the cry of the heart and the silence of God. Listen not only with your ears, but with your soul. Sometimes the truest question is not whether we believe in God, but whether He is still there when love has died, when vows are broken, when the heart has turned to ashes. I met a man standing in the ruins of his own marriage. He did not weep. He only looked at the empty space where his wife once sat and whispered, "Is divorce a sin? Even when staying would kill my soul." That question fell into silence like a stone into a deep abyss. Every answer men give each other is often a justification for fear, not an invitation to truth. Through centuries of faith and law, we have memorized verses as shields to hide our hearts. People read that God hates divorce, but few continue to see that. He hates hardness of heart even more. When I stood among broken souls, I heard something different. Not condemnation, but a call to return. Some come to the courts of men to dissolve a covenant, yet in that very act I saw the image of humanity before God. As mankind divorces its creator to chase illusions of freedom and self, I have walked through the depths where souls cry out because they mistook freedom for the absence of bonds. But in the eyes of God, freedom is not in escaping, but in being rightly joined. The story of divorce is not only about marriage, but a symbol of the covenant between God and humanity. He does not break it even when we betray. He does not let go even when we turn cold. He does not divorce even after countless times we have been unfaithful with the world. He still waits, still loves, still speaks to us that from the beginning it was not so. When I look back to Eden, I saw two souls created in unity, not to be bound, but to reflect the image of the one who made them. One soul in two bodies, two breaths joined into one song. That unity was not law, but grace. And every time humanity divides, we do not merely break a vow, we wound our own being. Therefore, every divorce leaves a scar on the soul. No matter how much we deny it, I do not say this to condemn, but to remind that every wound can be healed if we are willing to return to the light of the beginning. None of us is without sin, yet none is beyond redemption. The love of God is a flame that never dies, even when the ashes of doubt have covered faith. And perhaps the real question is not whether He allows divorce, but whether we still believe in His power to restore what has been broken. I believe He can. For He once restored me, a soul once divorced from faith, now reborn in grace. Have you ever wondered what truly makes love fall apart? It is not anger, nor the arguments, but the moment when two hearts stop looking in the same direction, when silence grows louder than promises. I want to hear you share your thoughts in the comments below about what you believe keeps a relationship strong, or what causes it to break. Every word you leave is not just a line of text, it is your presence. It lets me know that these stories I tell have brought peace to you and your family, and that I am not speaking alone. That means more than you can imagine to someone who creates content like me. Thank you for being here, for listening with your heart, and for walking with me through this journey. Long ago, the Pharisees came to Jesus not to seek truth, but to test Him They asked if it was lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason. The question seemed to come from faith, but within it was calculation, a trap woven with words of righteousness. They were not seeking light. They only wanted an answer that could make him stumble. And I realized, even in today's world, people often come to religion not to be changed, but to defend their own opinions, to find confirmation for their ego rather than transformation for their soul. But Jesus did not fall into their trap. He did not argue like a scholar, nor reason like a lawyer. He looked beyond their question and spoke of something deeper. He brought them back to the beginning, where love was not defined by rules. He said that in the beginning, God created man and woman, and the two became one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Those words were not a prohibition, but a reminder. He did not lower a punishment. He lifted the veil that covered the truth humanity had forgotten. Marriage was never meant to be a chain that imprisons, but a mirror reflecting the nature of divine love. It was created to teach us to love as God loves, a love that is not comfortable but steadfast, not easy but enduring. The world has turned that covenant into a contract, turned faithfulness into an option, and forgotten that some things were never meant to be divided. The Pharisees did not understand this. They heard but did not listen, spoke of law but lived without grace. They used Scripture as a blade, while Jesus used the same words as a healing hand. When he said from the beginning it was not so, he was not only speaking of the days of Moses, but of all time. He was speaking to us who live in a world where love has an expiration date, where leaving is easier than forgiving. He looked into the human heart and saw what we try to hide. He knew our fear is not the fear of losing someone, but the fear of loving truly, of being patient, of forgiving. And I think of you, the one listening now. Perhaps you have stood before the ruins, wondering, if God hates divorce, does he hate me? I want you to know that he does not hate you. He hates the pain that led you there. He does not stand far away watching you fall. He stands in the wreckage, in the tears, in the still warm fragments, and says, I am still here. God does not divorce you. Even if you have divorced your faith, he does not walk away when you are weak. He steps closer. When I read this story, I do not see an angry God, but a God who understands the human heart better than anyone. He knows love can be not because of sin, but because we have forgotten how to love. And he wants us to remember that true love is not the absence of pain, but the choice to stay even when it hurts. Marriage was not created to be perfect, but to be holy, not to make us happy easily, but to teach us to love deeper, truer, closer to the heart of God. Perhaps, as you hear these words, let your heart pause for a moment. Think of the one you once loved, or the one walking beside you now. Ask yourself, in the coldest days, what have I done to keep that flame alive? Because love does not die by itself. It only needs to be remembered through faith. Forgiveness and the tenderness of God flowing through human hands. I tell you this not to make you feel guilty, but to remind you that you are still loved. That every crack can become a place where light enters. And if you are listening today, I believe that love is still there. It has not vanished. It is only silent, like a seed resting deep in the soil, waiting for the light to touch it, to rise again into new life through grace. Jesus did not respond with anger. He did not stand in the circle of human debate. He brought everyone back to the beginning, to the place where the first light touched the dust, where love had not yet been stained by pride. He said, in the beginning God created man and woman, and the two became one flesh. Those words rang like a bell, awakening a forgotten memory within mankind. For we live in a world that has forgotten its origin. a world that uses logic to justify division and law, to hide the wounds of the heart. But Christ did not come to teach us how to argue. He came to teach us how to see again. When he said from the beginning it was not so, he was not speaking of an ancient age. He was reminding us that within every human being there remains a fragment of Eden, a part of the soul that once knew what it meant to be united, to love without fear of pain, to live in the wholeness of grace. But over time, we lost that. Love became negotiation. Covenant became contract. Faith became condition. And grace was replaced by self-interest. Humanity began to love not to reflect the image of the Creator, but to fill the emptiness of the self. Jesus saw through it all. He knew that every time we divide, every time we choose to walk away, something within our soul also breaks. It is not only the relationship between two people that shatters, but the relationship between humanity and God Himself. For marriage is not only the bond of flesh, but the mark of the soul of the meeting of two lives in the divine intent of God. When we wound the one we once loved, we also wound the image of God within ourselves. And that is why Jesus did not argue with the Pharisees, because they did not need more law. They needed to see the face of God again in one another. He did not speak of permission. He spoke of holiness, not of limits, but of origin. From the beginning it was not. So is a reminder for all humanity that every fracture we see today is a result of drifting from His original design. When love is built on fear, doubt, and control, it decays. But when love is built again upon covenant, it lives, even through trial. Some say that God is too strict, that His words are a burden too heavy to bear. But the truth is, His words were never meant to weigh us down, but to set us free. For when we realize that marriage is a covenant, we no longer see it as chains, but as a sacred vow. God does not forbid us to love. He invites us to love with meaning, not to love for acceptance, but to love as a reflection of His own heart. When we understand that every pain, every sacrifice, every tear becomes worthy, because within them lies the image of grace. He does not deny that some relationships must end. He knows that evil, abuse, and betrayal are real. Yet even in those things, He sees what is sacred and must be protected, the dignity of the human being and the soul of faithfulness. Therefore, He does not only protect marriage, He protects the person within it. He does not want us to live in chains. He wants us to live in grace, but a grace that is not cheap, not easy, but paid for with the steadfastness of faith. I have seen in the eyes of the broken a deep fear, the fear of being unworthy of love. But if God still chooses to love those who betrayed Him, if He still chooses to forgive a humanity that once nailed Him to a cross, then who among us can say we are beyond forgiveness? When we understand this, we begin to see marriage differently. It is not a place for perfection, but a place for the training of the soul, not a shelter from pain, but a school to learn how to love deeper through it. For true love is not born in joy, but refined through trial, and only by passing through those trials do we understand the meaning of covenant. When Christ said, "What God has joined together, let no one separate," He was not only speaking of marriage, but declaring a truth for every sacred relationship. Everything God joins in love is meant to reflect Him. If humanity could understand this, they would stop searching for escape and begin searching for return. For happiness is not found in leaving, but in coming back to the source of light, where love is no longer defined by fear, but by grace. When Jesus spoke of hardness of heart, He did not condemn. He touched the deepest place within humanity, where pain is hidden and mercy has grown cold. He knew that every brokenness does not begin with betrayal or anger, but with the moment the heart no longer wants to understand, no longer wants to bow down, no longer wants to forgive. He said that Moses allowed divorce because your hearts were hard. Those words were not an accusation, but a gentle sigh filled with compassion. For when the heart turns to stone, love loses its breath. It still exists in form, but inside it grows cold, like a lamp without oil to burn. Hardness of heart is not just stubbornness, it is a sickness of the soul. When pride outweighs mercy, when honor becomes more important than kindness, when we no longer fear losing the presence of God within our relationships. Jesus did not speak those words to condemn, but to reveal the root of the wound, to show that before a marriage breaks, the heart had already broken long before. People begin to love with reason, calculate with emotion, and forget that true love is not measured by fairness, but by grace. When hardness of heart appears, love does not deal loudly, it deals keenly, in the silence of dinners without words, in the eyes that no longer hold tenderness, in the days when two people still share a home, but their souls walk in different directions. Jesus saw that in the eyes of the Pharisees, and he still sees it in the eyes of humanity today. When he said, because your hearts were hard, he was inviting us to return to the softness of the soul, to the capacity to understand, to the faith. That love cannot save itself, but is only saved when placed in the hands of God. In this life, the hardest thing is not to love, but to keep the heart from turning to stone amid pain. For when people are hurt, they build walls instead of praying, choose silence instead of honesty, choose to leave instead of staying. But Jesus did not build walls, he removes them. When he was hanging on the cross, he still said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. In those words we see his entire heart, a heart that never hardened, even when betrayed to the end. And that is what he came to teach us. Not a weak love, but a love strong enough to remain tender through suffering. Forgiveness is not agreeing with what is wrong. It is freeing the soul from the weight of hatred. When we forgive, we do not deny the pain. We simply choose not to let it rule us anymore. And in that choice, freedom begins. God does not ask us to stay in relationships that destroy us, but he asks that we do not let the wound turn us into someone else, that we do not let pain make us numb, that we do not let heartbreak extinguish our faith and love. Some marriages must end. Some wounds cannot be repaired. But what God desires to preserve is the heart within it. Marriage may end, but the soul must not wither. A soft heart is not a weak heart. It is a brave one, willing to love again after being broken. If you have faced betrayal or deep pain, to know that God is not far from you. He's there among the fragments in your hands, quietly breathing life into them to make something new. You may no longer believe in love as before, but believe in the one who created it. His love is not worn by time nor stained by failure. If you let him touch your heart, he will soften what has turned to stone, make it beat again, make it love again. This time in the freedom of grace, hardness of heart is the root of division. But humility is the way home. When we bow down, we do not lose. We simply return to where love began. In that very weakness, grace is born, covenant is renewed, and the soul is healed. Therefore, the words of Christ are not judgment, but invitation. He did not come to accuse, but to make hearts soft again. And when the heart is softened, it learns to love again, to forgive again, and to know that even when everything seems broken, true love can still be resurrected. When Jesus said that Moses allowed you to divorce because your hearts were hard, But from the beginning it was not so. I heard not just a teaching, but the sigh of one who understands all the weaknesses of humankind. From the very beginning, he did not create law. He created love. He did not set boundaries. He created unity. But then sin entered, turning what was sacred into something negotiable. Humanity began to love with calculation, to measure and compare, and forgot that true love has never been an equation. Jesus knew this, and he did not come to rewrite laws. He came to restore the original design where love was still pure, untouched by fear and pride. When he said from the beginning it was not so, it was not a call to live in the past, but a call to remember that grace still remains, waiting to be restored among what is broken. In the eyes of God, marriage is not merely the union of two people, but a reflection of himself. It is not only a covenant between two human beings, but a reflection of the covenant between God and humanity. Within that covenant, love is not a feeling, but a commitment. Not a fragile promise, but a manifestation of eternal faithfulness. When two people stand before him and say, I do, they are not only making a promise to each other, they are making a vow before God that they will become a reflection of his patience, his kindness, and his steadfast love in a changing world. But humanity has forgotten this. They enter marriage as a choice, not as a calling. They love to find happiness, but forget that true love also bears a cross. They want to be understood, but few choose to understand. They seek the perfect person instead of becoming whole together in God. So when wounds, differences, and trials appear, they think love is gone. But in truth, that is when love is being tested, just as gold cannot shine without fire. Love cannot deepen without pain. Jesus never said that every marriage could be saved. He said that every heart could be saved. Some marriages must end. But there is no heart beyond the reach of grace. And sometimes redemption is not found in staying, but in leaving without hatred. He did not condemn those who left. He wanted them to know that grace still walks beside them, that he does not stand on the side of law, but on the side of true love. Because to him, what matters is not only the structure of marriage, but the soul within it. The love that Christ teaches is not a comfortable love, but a love that knows sacrifice. It chooses to forgive when it could retaliate, to endure when it could leave, to stay when every reason says to go, for that is how God loves humanity. He saw sin but still chose to save. He saw betrayal but still chose to remain. He does not love because we are worthy. He loves so that we may become worthy. When we understand that marriage is no longer a fragile contract, but a sacred space where the soul is refined through trial and healed through faithfulness. Every time we choose to forgive, we awaken the image of Eden within us. Every time we choose to believe, even in the smallest spark, we reflect the loyalty of the one who has loved us since before time began. Yet there are many who no longer believe this. They look back at what was lost and see only wounds. They wonder if God is still there. And the answer is yes. He is there among the ruins, in the long nights of loneliness, in the tears that have not yet dried. He does not disappear when we fail. He stands kindly nearer, gathering the fragments, waiting for us to place them in his hand. God's love is not only for those who have kept the covenant, but also for those trying to find it again, not only for the marriages that stand strong, but for the souls still trembling in the dust. If you have loved and lost, held on and let go, know that he still looks at you with hope. He does not ask why you fell. He asks if you will rise again with him. He does not erase the past. He transforms it into a testimony of grace. Every crack in your heart can become a place where light enters if you let him touch it. He does not need your love to be perfect. He only needs it to be real. For he does not seek those who have never broken. He seeks those willing to be made whole again. And perhaps that is the deepest meaning of Scripture, that marriage is not merely the story of two people but a reminder of the relationship between God and humanity. He remains faithful even when we are not. He continues to love even when we forget him. He still waits even when we have wandered far away. His love is the covenant that cannot be broken, the flame that cannot die, the light that still shines even when we are lost. And only when we understand this will we truly know what it means to love as God has loved. There are those who, when hearing the words of Jesus about marriage, bow their heads in silence. Not because they do not understand, but because they understand too well that to live according to what he said, one must learn again how to love. Not by instinct, but by grace. When Jesus said, "What God has joined together, let no one separate," he was not placing a burden upon anyone's shoulders. He was gently reminding us that true love cannot be divided, for it does not belong to man. It belongs to him. That love does not begin from emotion, but from the divine intention of the Creator, and because of that, it carries within itself something the world cannot comprehend. Holiness. Holy love is not perfect, but it is faithful. It does not avoid pain, but it never allows pain to be the reason to stop loving. Jesus did not deny that humanity is weak. He knew better than anyone that we would fail, hurt one another, and wound those we love. Yet within those weaknesses, he still saw the possibility of redemption, still saw the faint light within a hardened heart. His love is not only an example, it is the power that allows us to love again, to believe again, and to begin again even when everything seems lost. That is why within every marriage, within every love, there is always a trace of miracle, not the kind that erases suffering, but the kind that makes us stay even when suffering is present. When we place love in the hands of God, it ceases to be possession and becomes surrender. We do not love to hold, we love to reflect him. When love breaks, he does not only see sorrow, he sees the opportunity for grace to be revealed. Some go through heartbreak and think they have lost their worth. But the value of the soul is never measured by what it keeps, but by what it learns to let go. God does not ask who was right or wrong. He asks who still has mercy, because mercy is where love can grow again, like a sprout rising from ashes. In this fractured world, we fear that love will not last, that the one we love may change, that promises may be forgotten. But God teaches that endurance does not come from control, it comes from trust. True love does not need to prove itself. It only needs to be kept through daily faithfulness. Like breath that requires patience, silence to listen, and gentleness to understand. When we know that love is part of a divine plan, we no longer fear pain, because we understand that even wounds can become the place where grace blooms. You may have thought love demands two perfect people, but God never sought perfection. He chose flawed souls to teach them how to love through imperfection. Just as he loves humanity even when they turn away, he calls us to love even when the other is weak. For true love is not born to receive, but to endure, to be patient, to reflect the image of the one who loved us before we knew him. When we love in this way, we do not only preserve marriage, we preserve a glimpse of heaven in a world falling apart. There will be moments when you feel exhausted, when faith runs dry, when prayers feel empty, when the eyes beside you no longer reflect the light they once did. In those moments, God does not say, "Try harder." He says, "Come closer." For love cannot be revived by willpower, only by his presence. When we bring our pain before him, he does not erase it, he transforms it into testimony, a testimony of a love that cannot be buried, but can only rise again. He never promised marriage would be easy, but he promised that if he is in the midst, there will always be a way back. He never promised we would not cry, but he promised to wipe our tears. He never promised we would not be hurt, but he promised that hurt would not be the end. So when love grows weary, pause, not to walk away, but to remember why you began. Look at the one beside you, not as who they were, but as a soul entrusted to your care by God. When we love in His light, we will see that nothing is truly lost, only transformed to become more sacred. And when all words are silent, when people stop arguing about who is right or wrong, only one thing remains unchanged. The love of God, a love that never tires, never demands, never fardis, the flame that keeps every lamp from dying, the place where marriage is restored, the soul finds rest, and the human heart learns once again to beat in rhythm with heaven. When I read the words of Jesus, except for sexual immorality, my heart tightened. Those words were not a sentence, but a sigh, a truth spoken out of compassion. For He knew there are wounds that can no longer be healed by silence, souls that have endured so much that only breath and nameless tears remain. When Jesus said those words, He was not opening a door for people to abandon one another. He was opening a space for grace to enter. He was not granting permission for separation. He was acknowledging that there are things so deeply broken that only the love of God can reach and restore them. Jesus understood that betrayal is not merely an act, but a storm that sweeps through the soul, carrying away trust, hope, and the safety once found in the heart. Yet He also knew that even in ruin, His love does not disappear. It transforms from passion into mercy, from pain into restoration. When humanity betrays, the covenant tears, but God still looks upon that torn fabric with patience. He does not discard it. He mends it thread by thread, not with needle and thread, but with His own blood shed upon the cross. He knows there are those standing on the edge of collapse, wanting to forgive, but unable, wanting to believe again, but too numb to feel. He does not blame them. He simply calls them closer. For only when we stop trying to heal ourselves can we allow Him to heal us. Some say that if Jesus allowed divorce, it means He accepted it, but that is not true. He did not approve. He had compassion. He knew that law exists for the weak, and mercy was born to protect them. In that time, a man could abandon his wife with a single paper, leaving behind a woman stripped of honor and future. And it was into that reality that Jesus spoke, not to make divorce easier, but to remind that every act of departure leaves behind a wounded soul. Jesus did not tell people to endure in silence, but He taught that every decision must be guided by compassion. Some hearts must leave to preserve life, while others leave out of fear. He sees both, and He knows the difference. He does not love the one who stays more, nor despise the one who leaves. He loves them both, for He sees the pain within every choice. If you have ever been betrayed, it is not just the pain of loss, but the shattering of trust. You ask yourself what you did wrong, what you lacked, and God knows you were never meant to carry that burden. He did not come to add guilt. He came to lift the weight you could not bear. And if you are the one who caused the pain, living now in regret, God is not turned away from you either. He does not see your sin. He sees your potential for renewal. He does not ask why you did it. He asks if you want to come home. For the love of God is not built on condition, but on sacrifice. That love does not seek fairness. It brings redemption. Many believe that because they have failed in marriage, they have lost their worth. But God never defined a person by their success. He defines them by their courage to love again after breaking, because to love again after ruin is the bravest act of the soul. Proof that the light of God still lives within. And if you carry a wound without a name, if you have walked through the pain of separation, betrayal, or remorse, know that God is not standing far away watching. He is within that very wound. He does not promise to erase the pain, He promises to give it meaning. So do not let the past define you. Let grace do that. Every time you forgive, every time you choose gentleness over bitterness, every time you let your heart soften instead of close, you allow God to rewrite your story. And one day, when you look back, you will realize that the place where you once broke is the very place where grace took root. And within those ashes, a new image of love has risen, no longer carrying the scent of fear, but the tender breath of healing. There is something humanity rarely realizes, that God never used the sword to teach about love. He used only the face of mercy when he spoke of marriage, adultery, or divorce. He did not speak as a judge delivering verdicts, but as a father watching his children break apart in the middle of life. He did not come to condemn those who have fallen. He came to bind their wounds. For to God, the true sin does not lie in the breaking, but in forgetting the way back. He does not count the times we fall. He counts the times we dare to rise again. And in that gaze, he sees the worth of every soul, even those once despised, those who thought they were forgotten, those who believed they were no longer worthy of love. I have met people who said they no longer dared to walk into a church because they feared the eyes of judgment. They said that when their broken past was mentioned, others turned away as if divorce were the mark of sin. But Jesus never did that. He never turned away from anyone's eyes. He looked directly into them, into their pain, into their shame, into what they tried to hide, and said, I am still here. When the woman caught in adultery was thrown before the crowd, he did not ask about her sin. He asked about theirs, those holding the stones. Then he stooped down and wrote in the dust, perhaps the names of their hidden sins. When they left one by one, he stood and said, has no one condemned you? Neither do I. Go and sin no more. That was not tolerance. It was redemption. God does not treat divorce as something small, but he does not treat it as a punishment either. He sees behind every separation a bleeding heart, shattered dreams, children learning to stay silent before their parents' pain. In that silence, he does not stand outside. He stands in the middle. He does not stand with the one who leaves, nor with the one left behind. He stands in the place no one wants to stand, where the pain is most real, to do what no one else has the strength to do. To love both sides. For only the love of God is big enough to embrace both the one who failed and the one who was hurt. If you have ever thought that God is only with those who do right, remember that. He always chose to dwell among those who did wrong. He ate with tax collectors, defended the adulteress, touched the leper, spoke with the woman scorned at the well at noon. He chose to be with those. No one else would choose. Because his love does not require conditions to exist. When he said from the beginning it was not so, he was not forcing humanity to return to the past. He was opening a door for the future, where love could be born again, even after it had been lost. Maybe you carry a pain no one knows. Maybe you still smile, but inside hold unanswered questions. Maybe you once loved, once believed, and everything fell apart. But God says he does not ask you to be strong. He only asks you to come close. He is not in the perfect places. He is in the ruins. God does not dwell in hearts that are spotless. He dwells in hearts that are torn, yet still willing to love. And there, the miracle begins. We often think true love is what never breaks. But true love is what brings us back to life after the breaking. When everything collapses, when people leave, when promises fade, it is not the end. It is where grace begins to write again. And if you let God hold the pen, the story will be different. It will not end in bitterness, but in peace. For his love is not a love that avoids pain, but a love that walks through it and turns it into light. Marriage is sacred, but the souls within it are even more sacred. God does not protect marriage to preserve appearances. He protects marriage to protect the people within it. And when marriage falls apart, he does not cling to the shell. He saves the soul. In his eyes, people always matter more than systems. Mercy always rises above law, and love always outweighs sin. He does not call us to be perfect. He calls us to be honest, to say, I have been hurt, I have been wrong, but I still want to be loved again. When we can say that, when we dare to place our broken hearts in his hands and let him make them beat again, that is the resurrection of love. Because love does not only live in those who have never broken, but in those who have shattered and still have the courage to believe that if God has not stopped loving them, then they can still learn to love again. With a soul that has been healed, there are things God says not to make people afraid, but to awaken them. When he said that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery, he was not building a cage of laws. He was drawing a boundary for what is sacred, a boundary that the world had begun to treat carelessly. He knew how easily people touch what belongs to God without understanding its worth. Like holding a piece of crystal and thinking it is only glass, forgetting that once it slips from the hand, it will never be whole again. When Jesus spoke those words, he was not condemning those who failed. He was warning the world that love, covenant, and faithfulness are sacred languages that cannot be spoken by the mouth alone, but must be written with the soul. Humanity always seeks escape when things become hard. When relationships grow cold, we call it the end of love. When promises feel heavy, we say we need freedom. But God did not create marriage to be a chain. He made it to be a mirror. Marriage is not just where love is proven, but where people learn to reflect the love of God. It is where forgiveness is practiced, compassion is tested, and faith is refined. Every time we endure, we do not grow weaker, we grow more like him. Every time we choose to stay when we could leave, we do not lose freedom. We touch the depth of grace itself. Jesus did not speak these words to bind us, but to protect what is holy. Because he knew that once humanity treats love as temporary, it will also treat grace as something that can change. When love loses its roots, hearts grow numb, and the world turns cold. He did not speak to control people, but to save their hearts from hardening. Nothing corrupts the soul faster than treating what is sacred with indifference. And love, to him, is part of the very essence of heaven. I once met people who said they had married many times and each one failed. They said maybe they were not meant to love, but I believe God never made anyone incapable of love. They simply have not yet learned to love through grace. True love does not begin when we find the right person, but when we allow God to change who we are. There are hearts that only want to be loved but refuse to love, and souls that want to be understood but never learn to listen. Marriage is not a place to demand perfection. It is a place to learn to love in imperfection. People often ask, if God forbids divorce, what about those suffering in marriage? I believe God does not want them imprisoned. He only wants them not to let pain kill their hearts. Some marriages break because of a lack of faith, and some souls break because they stayed out of fear. God understands both. He does not force anyone to remain in darkness. He invites them into the light. But stepping into the light does not mean running away. It means having the courage to face oneself, to see what must change, what must be released, and what must be forgiven. God did not give law to make people suffer. He gave it to remind us that love must be honored. When we make vows before him, we are not only promising each other, we are saying to God, I believe in what you have joined together. And so when we break that promise, the greatest loss is not the other person, but a part of our own soul. Yet God's grace remains not to erase the past, but to relight the soul within us. If you have failed, if you have left or been left, I remember that God has not closed his door to you. He simply calls you closer to remind you that he is still here, ready to rewrite your story with you. You do not need to be perfect to be loved. You only need to be honest. Honest about your pain, your weakness, your longing to begin again. And when you place all of it in his hands, you will see that love is not something to possess, but something to learn for a lifetime. When humanity learns this, marriage will no longer be a chain, but a doorway to growth. It will not only bind two people together, but help them grow together in the light of God. And even if some loves do not reach their fullness, even if promises fade in tears, with God, nothing is ever truly lost. For he does not measure love by outcome, he measures it by faithfulness. A love that has broken yet chooses to become better, that chooses to keep kindness, that chooses to believe grace can begin again. That is love made holy. And perhaps this is what God meant when he spoke of covenant, not as a restriction, but as an invitation to step into something deeper, truer, and more enduring than anything humanity could ever build on its own. Perhaps the hardest part of the journey of faith is not believing in God when everything is good, but believing in him when everything has fallen apart, when dreams are gone, when love has left, when the heart echoes empty. That is when it becomes easy to forget that grace is still working quietly beneath the surface. But God does not abandon us among the ruins. He still stands there, patient as the morning light slipping through the window, waiting for us to open our eyes and see that darkness has never been able to hold him back. Every divorce, every separation, every failure does not make him love us less. On the contrary, those are the very places where he begins his work of healing. God does not erase a pain. He gives it meaning. For to him, every wound can become a testimony. Every tear can become a seed for new life. When God sees a broken soul, he does not turn away. He bends down as he once bent to write on the sand, as he once lifted the adulterous woman to her feet. He is still writing that story in each of us, where ashes are stirred back to life by the breath of his mercy. God does not recreate the old. He makes all things new. He does not lead us backward. He leads us forward, but with hearts softened, humbled, and aware that true love can never come from the ego, only from grace. Some ask if, after being broken, they can ever be loved again. I believe they can, because God is the God of beginnings, not endings. He does not require perfection before love. He loves so that we may be healed. Each person carries a story unlike any other. Some bear the scars of betrayal, some the silence of sorrow, others the ache of regret for not cherishing what was precious. But God sees them all, and in his gaze there is no judgment, only invitation. He says, "Come to me, bring your wounds and your fears, for I can turn your ashes into bloom." Redemption does not come through loud mirror, but through quiet transformation. When we dare to forgive while our hearts still bleed, grace is already at work. When we dare to let go without hatred, God is rewriting the definition of love within our souls. When we dare to believe that pain is not meaningless, we touch a part of heaven itself. No one is free from wounds, not even those who believe, but faith is not a shield against pain. It is the hand that holds grace within pain. God never promised a life without night, but he promised we would never walk through it alone. And in every breaking, he keeps doing what he's always done, turning what humanity calls the end into a new beginning. If you are in that season now, where everything is silent and God feels far away, remember that he is still there. You are simply in the quiet part of the miracle. Trust that the light will return, not because you deserve it, but because he does not know how to stop loving Your marriage may have ended, but God's love for you has not. You may have lost faith in others, but He has never lost faith in you. And that is the most beautiful thing about grace. It does not only forgive, it believes in you again. Perhaps that is the deepest definition of the love God came to teach. A love unafraid of pain, unwavering through failure, unrelenting in its embrace of the weak, teaching them to rise again in His light. Marriage, after all, is only a metaphor for the love between the Creator and His creation. When we understand that, we see that everything God said about covenant in Scripture was never meant to chain us, but to teach us to love as He loves, to remain faithful even when betrayed, gentle in the midst of anger, and kind even while wounded. If we can learn to do that, this world will no longer be a place of division, but a garden where love is planted again from the ruins. And when we look back, we will see that everything that once broke us did not come to destroy us, but to awaken within us the capacity to love more deeply, more truthfully, more like God Himself. So if today you stand among ashes, do not be afraid. In the hands of God, ashes are new soil, and it is there that the seeds of love will take root, grow and bloom into something so beautiful that even old wounds will bow in peace. As this journey comes to an end, I want you to know that everything you have just heard is not merely words, but the heartbeat of a soul that has walked through darkness and found light in the hands of God. I have learned that faith is not the path of the perfect, but the journey of those who choose to keep believing even after they have fallen. Every time you forgive, every time you choose peace over anger, every time you dare to love, though you have been hurt, you bring a touch of heaven down to earth. I do not know where you are in your story. Perhaps at the beginning, perhaps somewhere in the middle, or perhaps trying to write a new chapter after heartbreak. But I am certain of one thing. If you can still hear the quiet voice of God calling in your heart, your journey is not over. Do not let pain make you doubt His love. Let Him turn the things that once made you fall into the foundation that helps you rise stronger, deeper, and kinder. We cannot return to the past, but we can let God rewrite its meaning. Believe that no failure is ever final when grace is still at work. And when you leave this place, carry this truth with you, that God is not only in the church, He is in your every breath. In the mornings when you wake, in the nights when you pray in silence, in the tears you never tell anyone about. I pray that you will not only hear the word of God with your ears, but live it with your heart. Let His kindness flow through you, shaping the way you speak, the way you forgive, the way you love. And if there is one thing I want you to do after hearing this story, it is this: start today, live a life that loves more, believes more, and gives thanks more. Because sometimes your peace is the most powerful testimony of God's grace. May peace fill your heart, and may the word of God you have heard today walk beside you through every step ahead. I pray that you find light in silence, a strength in faith, and rest in His presence. May your home be filled with peace, your heart with courage, and your soul with quiet confidence that you are never alone. As you close this video, I remember one thing: God is still beside you in every moment, in every breath, until we meet again. Stay strong, stay gentle, and stay close to His grace. Thank you for staying until the very end. Thank you for listening with all your heart. May the peace of God be with you and your family today, tomorrow, and forever.